We welcome you to episode 18 of the Exit Philosophy podcast, and we are coming to you late in the evening on Labor Day, Monday night, September the 4th. We always record on a Monday, but usually it's in the morning. Griff and I talked on the weekend and decided it would be best to wait until Monday evening because the Blue Jays played a day game in Oakland, and they got the W. It was not quite a sure thing, although it looked like it would be a sure thing, and then all of a sudden it wasn't a sure thing, but then they blew the doors off in the top of the 10th inning and then proceeded to try to jam the door back on their foot in the bottom of the 10th, but they won the game 6-5, and they are so far 6-4 through this 15-game run against nothing but easy, lousy, crappy BS competition that shouldn't even be taking a major league field.
We did predict or say that in advance that in the 15-game stretch against losing teams, which they have, as we record, they have 5 games left, and as you pointed out, are 6-4. We said they needed to be 10-5 just to even have a chance to reach 91 wins, which is my projected win total. But so there's 6-4. They need to win 4 of the last 5, which Kansas City coming in, Bobby Witt will probably go wild. And the last 2 games in Oakland, who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, they're making it interesting, but they're still 6-4 during that stretch with a couple of tough losses.
That is the voice of Richard Griffin. Griff, I'm Scott MacArthur. You may also know me as Scotty Mac. And this is, again, episode 18 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. And before we get into breaking that down a little further and some of the other hot topics in Blue Jays land and Major League Baseball land, a reminder that griffsthepitch.com is where you can get all of Richard Griffin's work, multiple weekly Blue Jays and MLB columns. There's a weekly MLB Power Rankings column. You can get exclusive conversations that Griff has one-on-one with some of the game's current and former greats, with a heavy focus on Blue Jays and former Montreal Expos. And the Exit Philosophy podcast, which you're listening to right now, is also linked at griffsthepitch.com.
So before we get into it, Scotty, where are you this week? You seem to be in a different venue once more.
What are you admiring, Griff? And if you're watching on YouTube at youtube.com/exitphilosophy, you're seeing this. Are you admiring the kitchen faucet?
Yes, that's
my right shoulder with the dish soap in behind. Yeah, the refrigerator.
I'm fascinated. Yes,
the refrigerator over my left shoulder, or the ship on top of the cupboards in the kitchen, way above my left shoulder.
That's a schooner.
Is that a schooner? Not a ship.
I believe it is. I don't know. The other schooner I get at a bar and it's full of beer. So
there you go. There you go. You are a mariner after all. Here I am, not sounding like a maritimer. I'm actually now where I'm going to be for the foreseeable future until I lock in my own property. So this is where I spent some time early in the spring. And it's a studio apartment, which is why there's a kitchen behind me, and I don't really have a whole lot of options in terms of backgrounds. So it's a tiny spot, but I love it. It's a great area in Bedford, right on the Bedford Basin, on the water. It's a 15-minute drive to Halifax. The weather's been great this week. There's more great weather to come. And yeah, so that's where I am.
As for myself, I'm in my home studio, which I'm really starting to like, with the pictures over my shoulder for those who are watching on YouTube. But I also am sporting a baseball cap. It's a tribute to the passing of Jimmy Buffett, the legendary Jimmy Buffett. This is a Margaritaville baseball hat that was a giveaway by the Blue Jays 2 years ago, and I've hung on to it. And I'm wearing it tonight, the Margaritaville hat, as a tribute to my late uncle, Lorne Devine, who in Jimmy Buffett's prime, when Margaritaville first came out, would lead us all in a sing-along with to Margaritaville, and it's one of my fondest memories growing up. Well, I was 20 something at the time, but still much younger. One of my fondest memories of my late great uncle and of Jimmy Buffett. So with that being said, the setting being laid, let's get into discussing baseball and the exit philosophy.
Yeah, R.I.P. Jimmy Buffett wasting away in Margaritaville. And Griff, I've been pointing out all the faucets and the cupboards and the schooners and the refrigerators over my shoulder. I think we need to talk about that little boy over your left shoulder who has grown into a young man with a bright baseball future. He is still a young player at 24 years old, but Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has struggled this year. And I'm just going to put it into context for you right now. If I were to say to you, Griff, per Baseball Reference, I know you love this so much, per Baseball Reference, as we sit here on Monday night, September the 4th, Labor Day night, which Blue Jay leads the team in B-WAR? Baseball Reference's wins above replacement statistic. Which Blue Jay?
Kevin Kiermaier.
Matt Chapman. Matt Chapman has been worth 4 wins, according to Baseball Reference. Bo Bichette is right up there close to him. You know who is not in the top 10? Not in the top 10.
You're leading me into a Vlad response.
Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's been worth only 1.1 Baseball Reference win above replacement for this team this year. And look, the struggles have been documented. Yes, he's hitting the ball hard, but he's hitting the ball hard on the ground a lot. And as has been some misfortune, and as has been at times, and it feels like a lot of times, a flawed approach, he has been beating those balls into the ground right at opposing infielders. And he's up to 20 double plays hit into this season. But as this team enters September, fighting for its life, fighting for a playoff spot, Griff, with the left side of the infield, Bo Bichette and Matt Chapman on the shelf, there were some hustle issues over the weekend in Colorado, and you put it out there on Twitter, and I've got it right out in front of me right now to the tune of 231,000 views. You tweeted, "It's time for Blue Jays manager John Schneider to publicly call Vladimir Guerrero out for his contra performances instead of constantly excusing his failures at the plate. 2 double plays and 7 base runners left on base in a game that ended 8-7 for the Rockies. Leaders got a lead." There was also Vladdy admiring a deep fly ball that he thought was going to leave the park and ended up being a single as a result because it was not a home run. There's stuff that is controllable with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. that he is just not paying close enough attention to. And all we heard in spring from the manager and the coaching staff was attention to detail. We were going to be better at attention to detail. And I just sat back and I thought, man, these feel like shots at Charlie Montoyo. We're going to do things better now. We are going to pay more attention. I haven't seen it this year. And he is 24, but he's a leader on this team, and he's got to figure out a way to be better about it.
Well, I've noticed, and that pretty much summarizes what's been out there this week in terms of my advice, my tweet, and I'm shocked that it got as much attention as it did. But going back to spring training, one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that when you replace a manager, you try and replace him with the opposite. You don't try and replace him with the same. So when they say we're going to pay attention to the detail, they were taking shots at the Charlie Montoyo regime. But the commonality between the two is Vlad. Vlad is the guy that back under Charlie Montoyo, somebody had to light a fire with Vlad. And now 5 months into the season, it's the same problem. And I love John Schneider as a person. You know, there's some strategy decisions that we all take exception to, especially when they end up not working out. And a lot of that has to do, a lot of the not working out is the pressure that's constantly on the bullpen to hold a 1-run lead, to hold a 2-run lead in late innings through the last 4 innings when the offense fails. But I worry about John Schneider. So the tweet about it's time for John Schneider to call him out publicly was made for John Schneider. My feeling is that you bring the player into your office, you air him out one-on-one, no translator or anything, because he doesn't need it when he's hearing you give him shit as a manager. But then for John Schneider's image, he has to come to his post-game presser and let people know that he's done it. Let people know that he's done it. Discipline is a part of professional and kids sports. I went to a baseball field today with my grandson, and I was talking with my son about Vlad watching the ball, hitting the fence, and still being in the batter's box. And my 9-year-old son said, yeah, he should have been running. And he's a ball player. My 9-year-old son's a ball player. He plays second, 9-year-old grandson. He plays second base, and he's a big Blue Jays fan. And if that's the influence that he brings back from watching a 3-hour Jays game, then that's not right. And I have this picture over my shoulder of Vlad Jr. and Vlad Sr. Vlad Sr. was not a part of Vlad Jr.'s life growing up. He was away playing baseball. Uncle Wilton was his hitting coach. He went to his academy. So how much of parental discipline, how much of that discipline that we're talking about that Vlad needs to be told, you have to do this. You can't just be Vlad hitting the ball over the fence and hitting a double play ball and not running it out. He's probably never had that. He's 24 years old. He will be a great player. He has the tools to be that player, but he's not a leader, and leaders got to lead. And that could be interpreted John Schneider, that could be interpreted within the clubhouse with the players, and Vlad eventually taking that role. But right now he's not there. John Schneider's getting ripped for the shortcomings of his superstar first baseman, or soon to be, or hopeful to be superstar first baseman, but it's not happening. The Blue Jays are in contention right now only because of the starting pitching and the bullpen. And that's why they're 6-4 against crappy teams with 5 games left. Go ahead.
Well, no, I just to take a spin on what you said. I mean, at the end there, this team is uninspired. Now, we sit and we watch. I don't see a lot of oomph there. And what does that mean in baseball? I'm John Gibbons, and any current or former manager will tell you that when a team isn't hitting, it looks like it's a bunch of zombies, right? It's the Walking Dead, because nothing much is happening. The offense has started to come around. They have been playing lesser opponents, but those lesser opponents have been keeping games generally close. I mean, they blew a big lead in their one loss in Denver over the weekend to the Colorado Rockies. They find ways to keep these opponents in games. And I know they don't have Bo, and I know they don't have Matt Chapman. And I look at Vlad and I wonder to myself, and I should probably have to put a $20 fine into the season-ending tip jar, Griff, for bringing up a hockey reference. But how important is it that your best players also be, quote, leaders? Or with Vlad, do we have a Phil Kessel Toronto Maple Leafs situation on our hands where we have a pretty good player a player who maybe isn't what some people wish he would be, although I'm still confounded by the Vladdy situation because I believe he's a better player than he's shown this year, both offensively and defensively, because he's regressed defensively as well. So is it crucial that Vladdy's that guy, or do we accept that this is Bo Bichette's team? And I know Bo's hurt right now, and that's not helpful, but that this is Bo Bichette's team, that it's Bo Bichette who can do the talking, both in the clubhouse and publicly. And Bo has done some talking while injured, including to Mike Wilner in the Toronto Star on Wilner's podcast. And Mike used some quotes in an article, in a column that he wrote. Kevin Gosman is the leader of the pitching staff, and he's the one talking about urgency. And I think he's talking about focus when he refers to urgency, among other things. Is it okay that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is not a leader, even if he is an incredibly important player on this team who needs to do more for this group?
I think you have to find a way to see whether Vlad is a leader or not. And that would include calling him out publicly, privately first, and then publicly, because I had a response to my tweet that said, if John Schneider goes out and calls Vlad out, he's going to lose the clubhouse.
No.
I believe it's the opposite. He will gain the clubhouse because there's no one in that room except Bo who could go to Vlad and just air him out. But to see the management and the manager and coaches not doing the same thing, that clubhouse has got to be frustrated, because they know, like we know, like we're discussing, that Vlad can be one of the great players in the American League, in Major League Baseball, if he focuses. And they need to find out if he can, or if this is all we get. But the next step is to hold him accountable for his jogging out ground balls. And I'm not saying that every once in a while that you can't, because Felipe Alou said about his own son Moises, don't expect someone 162 games to run hard on every ground ball. It's impossible. But Vlad plays most games. He's played 134 of 138. He's played 150. He doesn't jake. He doesn't take time off when he can play. But they need to see him hustle. They need to see him leave the box. They need to see him lead by example. He scored from first base against the A's on a ball up the alley, hustled all the way. He's a better base runner than people think, but he doesn't give himself that opportunity to prove it. And he needs to do all those little things that are signs of leadership. But to get to that point, he needs John Schneider to push him over the edge of that by giving him shit in public.
Okay, so there are two angles I want to take. One, which we'll talk about second, is the contract situation, because there's a macro to this. And two, which we'll talk about first, is the bounce off of what you just said, which is the micro and how to deal with this. Is John Schneider capable of having this conversation? In your opinion, you know him better than me. I dealt with John for a number of months in 2019. I got along with him quite nicely. I found him to be an engaging guy, but you know him better than I do, Griff. Is he capable, and by that I mean willing, to have this conversation?
He has managed and been around Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Bo since they were 17, 18 years old. He's been a part of their lives. He has that ability. I think he needs to be pushed by someone like Don Mattingly to do it. Don Mattingly's been around. Don Mattingly played for the boss when the boss was the boss back in New York with the Yankees when they weren't doing that well. I think he listens to Mattingly. I think John Schneider has the ability to go after Vlad and push him to the next level, but he hasn't done it yet. And I think that on his own, I think he told Ben Nicholson Smith that he sat down, he joked with Vlad when he got back about the not running out of the batter's box, and he said it worked out. And the Ben Nicholson Smith quote of John Schneider talking about him talking to Vlad was totally unacceptable. He needs to do more than that. He needs to push harder than that. He needs to embarrass Vlad to the point where he doesn't want to do that again, because the public perception of him is going to change. It has changed. Maybe he doesn't even know it's changed.
Okay, but so drilling further, managers are less independent today than they were even 10 years ago.
Correct.
And 10 years ago, they were less independent than they were 20 years ago. And then we can talk about the Earl Weaver, Sparky Anderson, Tommy Lasorda, your guy Gene Mock eras, all we like, right? The Little General, which I believe was the title of episode 2 of Exit Philosophy some 16 weeks ago. And look, I talk to people in and around the team who believe John Schneider's a good manager. Okay, so that's fine. And I think about John Gibbons being brought back to Toronto in 2013, and what I'm about to say falls in a similar silo, although I mean it differently. You know how I feel about the general manager, Ross Atkins. I think there's deep insecurity there. I think there's an overwhelming desire born of that insecurity to control everything. And when you have star players who are in their early but almost mid-20s, and you have a pitching staff the quality of the Blue Jays, which this year has held up, with the exception of Alek Manoah, you can go and get a guy. You go and get, I can't sit here and say Bruce Bochy would have had any interest in coming to Toronto, but I'm going to use him as an example for the sake of what I want to say. You know what Bruce Bochy has? Better MLB credentials as a player and as a manager or non-player than Ross Atkins. Ross Atkins can't walk down to Bruce Bochy's office after the game every night and give him the gears for 3 or 4 or 6 decisions that Bochy made that the general manager doesn't like. And so when you hire somebody who is a lifer in terms of being in the Blue Jays organization, and John Schneider has worked his way up, I don't dispute any of that. And I still think there's time here for him to establish himself as a big league manager. And God knows they've got a winning record since he took the helm more than a year ago from Charlie Montoyo. But I don't know how much freedom John Schneider has, because he was put into the position he's in because he is at the behest of his boss. That's just how I see it. So I just don't know if the dynamic is set up for John Schneider to be able to come in with a cudgel and make some noise.
If referring back to what I said earlier about when you hire a manager, most organizations are looking for the opposite of what they had. There were a lot of opposites available to what Charlie Montoyo brought, and John Schneider was one of them. John Schneider would not have replaced someone who was like John Schneider. That wouldn't have happened. They would have gone in another direction. But it reminds me of 1981 when Dick Williams, who's a Hall of Fame manager, was managing the Expos, and that was the year they went to the postseason and made it to the League Championship Series. And they made it to the League Championship Series with a early September replacement with Jim Fanning. Jim Fanning was the farm director. Jim Fanning had been the general manager in the first few years, from 69 to 74, 75. He was the general manager, then was the farm director. He had been around. And the logic that John McHale used for hiring Jim Fanning was that he knew Terry Francona. He knew all the young farmhands that were going to come up and help them reach the next level. He was not a good manager. Jim Fanning was not a good strategic manager. And they went within one game, within one pitch of going to the World Series. So to point a finger, I'm just saying that John Schneider could lead a team to the postseason and then do a Phillies and get to the World Series. The pitching is that good, but the offense, like we're talking about, they're in a series of 15 games right now, have played 10 of them, are 6-4. And I asked John Schneider in his office after a game if he was lucky that this stretch of games was coming along with all the Buffalo players coming up to help, or if he had Bo and Chapman there and they just ran through this stretch of 15 games, whether he would prefer that. And to me, having the Buffalo people come in and do what they're doing against bad teams is the best situation for this Blue Jays team right now. But when they come back, when Bo comes back, Chapman comes back, Danny Jansen hopefully comes back before the end of the season, that they need to press the gas down the stretch. But it hasn't happened in 132 games. So, but my point is that they can win with John Schneider managing this group, and they could go as deep as the pitching takes them. But was it a mistake putting him in that position when there were others available? I don't think Bruce Bochy was ready to come to Toronto. It was the one situation that he felt was right for him in Texas with the Rangers. So who else was there? It's a tough question in hindsight, but it's brilliant discussion. It's beautiful to talk about, but I'm not sure whether there's an answer.
Yeah, no, and I mean the Jays are what they are, and they have what they have. And again, I'll repeat. I mean, the people I talk to say that John Schneider's a good manager, so they feel he's right, and I trust their judgment. They are closer to it than I am, and I don't think they have any reason to lie.
The memes don't help him. Like when he turns and he puts his hands up for a replay, and clearly his coach on the phone was Gil Kim was telling him no replay, and the umpires make him go to replay. And there's other situations. There's going to the mound with Alek Manoah out there.
Right.
It's a second visit. There's 4 or 5 rookie mistakes that he's made that people are burned into people's minds, and rightly so. He messed up. He messed up 4 or 5, maybe more times. And that's what you're saying, is that a rookie manager should not have been put in this position when others are available.
Well, no, it's less about rookie. You know, Buck Showalter was a rookie big league manager with the New York Yankees, and Buck Showalter goes places, and then his teams tend to win World Series after he's gone. But he was a rookie manager with the New York Yankees, and they stumbled for a year, and then the 94 strike wiped out their season, and then they made the playoffs in 95, and then he was gone, and Joe Torre took over, and things went swimmingly for New York. But it isn't so much the rookie status as it is, I am a guy who is hung up on words and actions reflecting words. And for all the talk about culture and values and process and collaboration and all of these corporatized HR humping terms that just make me want to stick forks in my eyeballs, or at least acid in my eardrums so I don't have to hear them anymore. It's let's just, if they go on a run in the playoffs, whatever happens from here on out, Griff, is what happens. It doesn't erase the first 5 months of the season. It would be wonderful if they go on to win the World Series. And in an expanded playoff format, that is entirely possible. And it would be great to see the city of Toronto party and have a parade and all that stuff. But this season has generally been a grind, and I have wondered about the culture more than once. And I do believe that the people at the top set the culture. And I think they like to say that word more than actually it's a totally healthy culture there. And so I think there needs to be, and this is my phrase now, because I'm jumping in on the corporate fun. We need an off-season culture audit. We need an off-season culture audit. I don't know who's doing the auditing, but we need an off-season culture audit.
We need to do exit philosophy T-shirts with that on the front and exit philosophy on the back. And then
we need a culture audit.
Yeah.
And because if you call it a culture audit, then it sounds really smart. It's kind of like when you say, you know, Chad Green just needs to check one more box. He needs to enter a game mid-inning for the Buffalo Bisons before we can bring him up here.
Or as Bo is spending more and more time on the IL his first time around, it's part of the process. So, yeah. But I think the only, and we'll put a wrap on this part of it, I think the only way that the Blue Jays go deep into the postseason, they may make the postseason because, as you know, we've discussed, maybe we'll discuss later on how 91 is a reasonable win total, and it may now be even less with other teams fading as they play each other and going to Cincinnati and losing a game, that sort of thing. But the Blue Jays will only go deep into October if John Schneider and his coaching staff take care somehow of the Vlad situation. I think Vlad is the key to going deep. You know, we don't care if he hits a 420-foot single off the fence, but he needs to buy into what they're doing and lead by example. I don't think he'll ever be a rah-rah leader type guy. He needs to stop spilling liquid all over the guests on television. He needs to get serious about his own game, and that is the way that John Schneider will turn around his own image down the stretch for the final 30 games and beyond, if they're going to go that far.
I can just, if John Schneider ever got in Vladdy's face in the dugout and the camera caught it and like they were going at it, there would be a large swath of people who'd be saying, it's just performative.
Yeah.
Like, no, I mean, emotions happen and you're allowed to have them. I just feel like this is a sport that is turning people into robots. And I wonder if part of this too, and Griff, it's not the same for all 26 players. It isn't, because different people handle things differently. But when you're jamming so much information in between guys' ears on a day in, day out basis, that is going to affect certain guys. Other guys lap it up because their brains are wired that way.
Well,
it's overwhelming.
One visual on television from Colorado, from Denver, that just made me laugh was somebody scored a big run for the Blue Jays, came into the dugout and was walking down the dugout, and 6 guys were on their iPads. Yeah. Didn't look up to see this guy, to high five him, low five him, whatever. And to me, that's what has become of 2023 Major League Baseball.
Did you hear what Matthew Stafford, the Super Bowl champion from a couple of years ago with the LA Rams, did you hear what his wife had to say on her podcast? That Matthew, who's like mid-30s now and is entering his 15th or 16th year in the NFL, doesn't feel he can relate to a lot of his young teammates, because when he was breaking in with the Detroit Lions in the late 2000s, there were card games going on. Guys were shooting the shit at their locker stalls. And he says now everybody's just turned with their backs to the center of the room, faces toward their locker stalls, heads buried in their phones.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the world now, though. But
it's in every sport. It is. If they're not in the weight room doing their pregame reps, they're at their locker, and there's not very many of them because they know the media might be in there at a certain point. So they have the media hours, and that's when they go work out on the weights. But if they are at their locker, they're not interacting. There's no card game. The tables used to be set up so that players could play chess, could play cards, could play crib, could play gin, whatever. And that doesn't happen anymore. It's a changing thing, but it's just a reflection of where this game has gone, where
And
all major pro sports have gone.
Just as much as we're breaking down the Jays and talking about culture and accountability and all of that, as we sit here on Monday night, Labor Day, September the 4th, the Jays have beaten Oakland 6-5 in 10 innings earlier today. Griff, there's a guarantee. If the Blue Jays sweep Oakland, they will leave the Bay Area in a playoff spot, right?
Yeah.
Because they are a half game behind Texas and a full game and a half behind Houston. So you win the next 2 days. Houston and Texas are playing each other. Someone is going to lose both days there. You're either going to overtake Houston or overtake Texas.
Well,
if you beat Oakland.
Well, that's what I really haven't understood about all the angst going around among Blue Jays fans, is that the Rangers, the Astros, and the Mariners have 26 games among themselves. That means there'll be 13 winners and 13 losers, and the 13 losers reflect on the Blue Jays' chances of advancing as one of the 3 wildcards. So if you're handing out 13 losses among 3 teams, I say that the Blue Jays bar is being set lower, because these losses could be distributed 4 apiece. Somebody could get 8 of those losses. You know, that in the last 10 days, the Astro or the Rangers and the Mariners are playing 7 times in the last 10 days. If the Jays are in any kind of position and put some wins together down the stretch, down in that period, they are in business, and it might not have to be 91 victories to get them there. But, you know, like, there's people are scoreboard watching way too much when all of these games, these intramural games are coming up, and people are just looking, 2.5, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. And they're getting all bent out of shape.
Well, they're bent out of shape because they're bent out of shape, Griff, because they're not enjoying what they're watching.
Yeah, clearly.
You know, like it's not exactly been a thrill ride.
No, you know, they are playing with 4 key contributors from the Buffalo Bisons, and they're luckily playing bad teams.
Right. I've been talking
even in this situation, even in this stretch, it's not going to be like, every game's a 10-2 win.
No, right. But we've got a 5-month template to work with here. I'm not talking about Ernie Clement and Kevin Biggio or Davis Schneider or some combination thereof, or today's left side of the infield. Therefore, I'm saying it's been
a tough 5 months to watch.
You know, and yet they're 14 games over 500,
which is the most they have been all year, tied for the most they have been all year, and they need to reach 20.
Right.
For them to reach 91 wins. So they need 6 more above 500, and they're playing 5 in a row now against crappy teams.
Yeah. By the way, how many Oakland A's players had you heard of? And be honest.
There were Seth Brown.
Yeah.
The guy
Ryan Noda.
Rooker went to the All-Star game. Rooker was an All-Star.
Right. Ryan Noda.
Yeah, because he was a former Jay.
And Tony Kemp. That's it.
And Langeliers.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. Because whenever I hear Shane Langelier's name, I think of that Stephen King book. Was it the Langoliers or am I way the hell off? There were the Tommy Knockers. I know that.
And I just think they're mispronouncing it. It should be Langelier.
Langelier. Yeah. Okay. All right.
But some of
is that a little boutique store down on the corner? Is that what?
Some of the pitchers they brought in were foreign to me, and it's going to be the same by the time the Royals get in to Rogers Center. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be a superstar. He is right now. Yeah, and that's the one guy you got to make sure that you don't let beat you. And so it should be easy to pitch around one guy in a 9-man batting order.
Our old pal Perry Manassian. I would like to inject him with truth serum and just sit and listen to him talk for 20 minutes. That I would just one-on-one sit him down, just a little injection to get him to tell the God's truth about everything that's gone on with the LA Angels over the last 6 to 8 weeks, and just let it all come out. You know, the decision, which probably wasn't his, to go all in, although that's more exciting than it is to just pull the plug and divest, that falls flat on its face. And then in the last week, Lucas Giolito, Hunter Renfroe, on and on the list goes. Max Stassi was just put on the restricted list. Artie Moreno, the owner, just wants to get under the luxury tax because the moves that they made to go all in late July put them over. And so he waives a bunch of guys to get payroll off the books so that they come in under the luxury tax, Griff. Ohtani's got the torn UCL. He's still hitting. Wonderful player. Uncertain future there, obviously, with the Angels and just in general, given his arm. But what a wild and wacky month and a half.
Yeah, Perry Manassian, when he was, he was an assistant GM for Alex Anthopoulos in Toronto. He was one of his posse of 4 or 5 guys that followed him around. So when he went to Atlanta with Alex and then had the opportunity to interview for a GM job, of course he's going to take it. But as you point out, I think Arte Moreno is running that show, and every decision made by the GM is actually made by the owner, including the recent debacle of putting everyone and their mother on waivers, and all of the trade deadline moves have been undone. And Ohtani, the guy they were trying to impress, is now a one-dimensional DH for the foreseeable future. In fact, my recommendation, and tell me what you think, is that the best thing that Ohtani could do is sign a 2-year deal with a team with an opt-out after 1 year. And if he could start pitching after 1 year, then he would opt out and sign that 2-way player deal. If it takes him 2 years, at least he's got a contract and can now negotiate that mega contract that he was going to get as the best DH in baseball and the best pitcher in baseball, which would have been unbelievable. But it's not going to be there for multi-years now. Well, I mean, but that, like, to you, would that be a good option? 2-year deal?
Well, but what do you? I mean,
are you going to?
What do you even? But what do you even do if you're Ohtani right now? Do you have the UCL surgery theoretically tomorrow to get the clock going on your arm's recovery, and maybe you're not swinging a bat till next May or June if you need 8 or 9 months to feel 100% to at least be able to do that? Because if you don't get Tommy John until the fall, you're not going to debut as a hitter until later next year, and you're not going to pitch till 2025.
You'll have the Bryce Harper timeline as a hitter,
right?
And then, but if you're the Angels right now, do you schedule Ohtani's surgery because he wants it so he can come back for another team later next year, or do you use that as a negotiating tool? Yeah, we'll do it now if you sign for.
But couldn't Ohtani say, to hell with you, I'm hurt, I'm getting this surgery?
I don't know. Well, I think something was going to happen before the end of the season. Right, they're out of it.
They're done.
Yeah, and he's not going to re-sign there, probably under any circumstances right now.
They got to trade. They got to trade Trout. They got to trade Trout. They gotta, and he's had health issues again this year. And
how do you sell any tickets if you do that? How do you sell? Because they have a pretty hefty season ticket base. That would they all bail because Ohtani's not there and Trout's gone, and you let everybody else leave at the on waivers? I wouldn't. Well, I wouldn't pay for season tickets.
Okay, but I just, it's going to be more of the same there for a long time. Like Anthony Rendon is halfway through a 6-year gazillion-dollar contract, and it's been hurt the whole time.
Yeah.
And reporters tried to get access to him today in the clubhouse, and he turned to them and said something like, "No habla English today," and just threw a hoodie over his head and walked out. Like, the Justin Upton thing was a complete disaster. The Rendon thing has been a complete disaster. Trout hasn't won a playoff game in his career because in 2014, when he went, the eventual AL champion but World Series finalist Royals swept them in 3 games. And I was a month and a half ago, leading up to the deadline, people were writing like, well, they need to sell Ohtani on, we'll build around you and Trout. And I'm reading that and I'm going, yeah, you've had 6 years to do that.
They still have Brandon Drury.
Yeah, they do. And he's clearly an up and coming prospect. I mean, if you invert his age, he's 23, right? Or something like that. Like, I find that to be, that's one of those things we sit here and talk about the Blue Jays and we worry about them. But that's a team, Griff, where if you're a fan of the LA Angels, I don't see what you're looking at other than getting enjoyment out of Mike Trout playing each and every day, which hasn't mattered to wins and losses, but appreciating one of the all-time great players if he can stay on the field and be healthy. Otherwise, I don't know what you're looking forward to for at least a half decade.
Yeah. And that's the big problem, is that they've got to play the schedule for the next half decade. And if they get rid of all their stars and they start rebuilding, I mean, they gave up a lot of their farm system to get these guys, and then they put them on waivers. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and they've even made trades for that Ohapi guy, the catcher. I mean, Brandon Marsh has got almost a 400 on base percentage against right-handed pitchers this year for the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, you think the Angels could have used him? I mean, he's formerly their top prospect from a couple of years ago. Just stuff like that. Are you like a closet Rays fan now because you want me to be wrong about the Orioles winning the American League East? Are you kind of?
I will never be a quiet closet Rays fan. I just don't like that team.
Okay, so have you seeded the division?
I did some high level math, and it would seem fairly impossible for the Blue Jays to catch. I thought the lecture to Vlad and turnaround would have happened earlier, and then that would have given them a chance. But the fumes that I keep speaking about for the bullpen of the Orioles and for their starting rotation, I could see that happening in October, but their lineup can mash. Their young hitters can mash. They got some. That's what happens when you finish bottom of the American League, bottom of baseball for years in a row. That's what happened to the Astros and built them into a juggernaut. And I think that the juggernaut of the Baltimore Orioles is on its way. But those fans put up with a lot of crap for the 5 or 6 years where they were not playing well, where they were not doing anything, where they weren't building, where they were putting trash out there day after day, year after year. But now it's paying off, and God bless them. But they're going to be good the rest of the season, but fuming. They'll be on fumes in October.
And I just love how John Angelos, who's Peter's son, because Peter's like 92 now.
Yeah.
John Angelos is saying, Adley Rutschman's got what? 1 year and 100 days of MLB service time at this point. And John Angelos is saying, yeah, if we're going to keep these guys long term, all of our young great players long term, we're going to have to jack prices, man.
Yeah.
we're going to have to. He's like, he's not even wasting any time. Adley Rutschman's not going to be eligible for arbitration for another winter plus.
Yeah.
Jackson Holiday's not even there yet, although he just got promoted to AAA.
If they're jacking prices next year, anticipating down the road, that they're not saving that money for that. They're finding other places to spend that money, and typical of bad ownership. And I think the Orioles for years have had bad ownership under the Angelos.
Cubs are going to get into the playoffs.
Cubs are going to get in the playoffs. The 49ers, I'm not so sure.
We're flipping gears to the NFL now? What do you mean you're not
Well,
so
I'm just running through your favorite teams.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sport.
Well, I mean, I'm sitting. Thank you, by the way, for mentioning the 49ers, but not jumping immediately into the Nick Bosa contract situation, because that's not at all caused me any headaches.
And by the way, for those listening or watching, we are at Exit Philosophy going to dabble in some NFL conversation as the Major League Baseball season winds down. As we get into October, we're gonna diversify and get into maybe some predicting of weekly games, but definitely some Buffalo Bills and San Francisco 49ers analysis. And so we're going to be diversifying as soon as the Jays prove that they are going to be in or not be in the postseason.
Oh, you're convinced they're going to be there, Griff.
I am.
And I laid out the perfect plan for you.
I'm convinced that the path is there for them to get in.
Oh, it's obvious.
With less of the angst that fans are showing and less of the scoreboard watching. I'm just counting down to 91 wins. That's it. If they can reach the 91 wins, I'm saying they'll be there. If not, it'll be a coin flip. If three other teams get 92 or more.
Yeah, let's just look at it in the immediate. Houston's playing Texas this week. The Jays have won their first game in Oakland as we sit here right now on Monday night, Labor Day, September 4th. Houston beat Texas today. Jays are a half game back at Texas for the final wild card spot in the American League. They are a game and a half back of Houston. If the Blue Jays sweep Oakland, they will fly home from the Bay Area in a playoff spot, because there will be two losers in the Houston-Texas games tomorrow and Wednesday, while the Blue Jays are playing the A's, and you gain a game on each of them if you win on each of those losers, whoever they may be. And then you come home and you play Kansas City, and you have a real good chance to set yourself up nicely for the big 4-game series with Texas at Rogers Center next week. And if you TCB, look at me being optimistic, Griff. If they deal with Oakland and Kansas City and then take care of business with Texas, we could be doing Exit Philosophy episode 20 in 2 Mondays from now, talking about a team 4 games up on a playoff spot going, well, isn't this nice? We got a little October ball coming, right? Or they could do what they do and make it crazily difficult.
Well, I think a key, other than what we've talked about with Vlad's emergence as a clubhouse or as an on-field leader, is that Bo, instead of last time he took 18 days to come back off the IL, this time if he's ready to go, it's the 8th of September. So he'll be there when the Texas series starts. And Chapman's the same thing. And Eric Swanson is on his way back. What do you think of Chad Green? I mean, I thought he got screwed in his first outing, which the numbers were terrible, but I didn't think he pitched that poorly. And then he pitched well his second outing. What were your impressions?
Griff, he's a part of this. He's a part of it. Now, if I can borrow the term from Keith Hernandez when the microphone was on, but he thought it wasn't. I mean, if Green gets his tits lit for 3 or 4 appearances, then we reserve the right to change our minds. But Chad Green's a guy who's been there and done that. And, they pivoted perhaps on Friday night from making him a multi-inning guy in that game, just the way that things went. But I think they feel like he can do it. We know that he can enter a game mid-inning. We know he's capable of that.
Yeah,
You
that
didn't.
was a
You
box.
didn't.
That was a box that had to be checked. You know,
You
and
didn't
they
even
did
sense
that.
what you were looking. You were like, he's making a serious point here. He's not being sarcastic at all. This is we know that this veteran reliever can enter a game. I think he's a part of it.
When in fact all they were waiting for was September 1st when they could add a pitcher. But
he's a part of it, Griff, and the velocity's there that I've seen.
Yeah.
He's
It
up
might
for
be
nine.
down a mile. It might be down a mile per hour, but when he gets up in the zone, it's tough to hit. And
Yeah.
that's his modus operandi. And when Eric Swanson comes back, Jay Jackson's position is obviously the one that will be sent back to Buffalo or whatever happens to him. But they'll have 9 quality arms out there, and a guy who can carry 2 or 3 innings in Bowden Francis. And when the playoffs arrive, if they're lucky enough to be there and they have to cut back to 8 relievers, then one of the current starters can take Bowden Francis's spot as a 2 or 3 inning. And as we get closer, and if the reality seems to be real about their playoff chances, then we can discuss another time which of the 5 starters you would take out of the rotation and make your long reliever, because you only need 4 starters in the postseason, and the Jays' reliable, healthy starters have shown no indication of backing off.
They should be there. I think we both have felt that way all year long based on what's on paper, but they have made it difficult on themselves and they have been uninspired at times this year. But if you're right there, and they are a half game behind Texas with 3.5, 4 weeks to play, there is, and Texas still on the schedule. There is all the time in the world, and just get in, baby, and try to climb those standings as much as possible. You know, I don't know if the best wild card spot is available at this point. I mean, theoretically it is if you're close enough to Tampa Bay in the final 2 weeks and you actually go out and beat them when you play them.
Yeah.
They got 2 series, but I mean, that aside, if they get in, they're probably going to go on the road for a best of 3, either to Minnesota, Tampa Bay, or maybe one of the, Houston, Texas.
Yeah. Say if
locations.
If the Mariners sweep the 7th,
Mariners could drop. Yeah.
That could be it. But the fact is, nobody should be saying, oh, I'd love to finish 3rd wild card because then I can go face the Minnesota Twins in Minneapolis, and their win total at the end of the year is only going to be 85 or 86. Nobody should sleep on the Twins because the Twins have the great advantage of already having pretty much clinched their division so that they can set up, they can keep people healthy down the stretch, they can set up their rotation, and they are starting to play good enough, well enough that nobody should want to intentionally go in and play them at Target Field.
And what is the strength of the Minnesota Twins team? They're pitching.
Yeah, their bullpen is they got a bunch of big arms out there.
What has been the issue with the Toronto Blue Jays this year? They're hitting. What happens in Minneapolis when October rolls around? It gets cold. So, and I would presume a Toronto-Minneapolis series would happen in the day. I don't know if they're getting, don't know if they're getting prime time.
Those are early. But there might be a huge throng of Canadian fans crossing the border for those games.
Right. Winnipeg represent. Manitobans, get down there.
No doubt.
But it should be fun. I mean, they got, again, beat Oakland today. We're sitting here on Monday night, Labor Day, September the 4th. 2 more with the A's, off day, get home, play the Royals for 3. And then when we convene next Monday, Griff, it'll be a big series about to get underway with the Texas Rangers. In the meantime, I'm off to Lloydminster, Alberta midweek. We had John Gibbons on last week to talk about a lot of things, but in part to promote the fact that he and I will be, along with John Shannon, involved with the Lloydminster Bobcats Junior A hockey team's Evening of Champions annual fundraising event. So that'll be a blast. And like John Gibbons, the baseball guy, going to a hockey banquet.
He's a cross-country Canadian legend right now.
He is. He's
and so are you.
That bug in the net. Yeah, so am I. Yeah, in my own mind. And that's even deteriorating.
Maybe in Lloydminster.
Maybe
we'll find out. We'll talk about it next week.
We'll look forward to it. All right.
The whole ceremony and the banquet next week. I'll be very interested to hear about it.
Yeah, and you will know, even if you don't look at the NFL scores on Sunday, you will know by my mood on Monday whether the 49ers went to Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers.
We will pay attention now that we're going to incorporate some NFL talk down the road, but we got to start paying attention as of Thursday when the season opens for the National Football League.
All right, griffsthepitch.com is where you can get all of Griff's work, multiple weekly Blue Jays and Major League Baseball columns, a weekly MLB Power Rankings column, conversations that are exclusive with some of the game's current and former greats, heavy focus on Blue Jays past and present, and some of the great Montreal Expos. One of Griff's recent conversations was with Steve Rogers. And you can get the Exit Philosophy podcast linked to griffsthepitch.com. If you've been watching us on YouTube, you can ignore this part. We are located at youtube.com/exit philosophy. And if you are watching on YouTube, you need this part. You can get the audio versions of our podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. With all of that, we will leave it and talk to you next Monday. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, everyone, and good luck, Scotty, on your trip out west.